In 2023, Tiny Toons was rebooted as Tiny Toons Looniversity, the main difference being that, instead of short comical sketches, the show is a sitcom detailing the lives of the reimagined cast as they attend Acme Looniversity, this time presented as an actual college campus. And unlike the original acclaimed show, the series has received almost universal disdain from fans, myself included. As I've recently concluded a Tiny Toon Adventures retrospective, I debated if I should also feature this, and after a lot of back and forth saying I will and it won't, I finally decided I will, but just as part of my short series because, as you'll see, that's all the time most of these episodes deserve. I'm going to feature the entire show, episode by episode, and I'm going to try to critique it as fairly as I can without too many comparisons to the original. And I should say right off the bat that if you like this show, that's fine. Heck, there is the occasional thing to like. I just think the cons outweigh the pros, and I will be pointing both out as we go. With that said, let's start off with the first episode, Freshman Orientation. It's the beginning of a new school year at Acme Looniversity, with a new crowd of eager freshmen, including siblings Buster and Babs, who can't wait to learn how to be loony until they realize they'll be separated from most of their attendants. Note that I said siblings. Unlike the original show, the bunnies are fraternal twins in this series, and truth be told, this is a controversy I couldn't care less about. Besides a couple rare instances, their relationship in the original show was also based on friendship, not romance, to the point I think their catchphrase is put in to remind the audience of their status. They could have been siblings there, and it would have mattered about as much as here, so no, I have no problem with this change, and it doesn't affect my view of the show in any way. No, my problem is just how boring everyone is written. The original show didn't exactly have a cast of three-dimensional characters, but you could tell everyone apart just by seeing them for the first time. You had an idea of their personalities, what they may or may not be into, and their different reactions to certain situations. In this show, everyone is written the exact same way. With very few exceptions, every character has only one or two unique character traits that come into play only when the script demands it. Otherwise, every single situation could apply to anyone, every bit of dialogue could be said by any one of them, and it would sound the exact same. Everyone is written with the attitude of being generally nice and possessing the edginess of a marble, and that applies to the show's writing in general, especially this episode's plot, which is surprisingly crowded. All the students arrive at Acme Lou, as it's affectionately called, where Buster and Babs finally been assigned separate dorms and have to be apart for the first time in their lives. So they move in and meet their new roommates, including Plucky, who's now the rich spoiled kid, and Hampton, who's mostly unchanged from his original counterpart other than now speaking with a southern accent. And yes, Buster and Plucky fighting over who will get the top bunk is a genuinely funny sequence. Meanwhile, Babs takes her separation the hardest, but doesn't immediately get along with her new roommate and the one character that's actually been improved for the show, Sweetie. I didn't like the original Sweetie. I don't think anyone did, including the show itself. She had the least amount of purpose or utilization, and at best came across as an even more unfunny Tweety. Here, they've been promoted to main character status and given the personality of the outgoing, supportive, non-binary best friend. They're still written like everyone else, but at least they have a personality here, and they help Babs as she goes to argue she and Buster need cohabitation, including stopping at Shirley's, who's a rant for another time, and eventually Dean Granny, who's been assigned the cool, tough senior personality I generally don't like in media, but at least she's one of the few with recognizable character. And while all that's happening, there's a freshman gag showcase, where all new students must perform their own unique shtick for a chance at having their picture in the Hall of Fame, which Babs and Buster obviously should have won, but Hampton, who straight up admits he doesn't want to be funny, walks away with the prize, because this show also has the attitude that every episode must conclude with everyone happy, which it does, with Buster and Babs realizing they like their new friends and living situation, except it doesn't, it actually ends with an 80s style music video. I wish they went with a two-segment structure and gave the A and B plots their own episodes, because as is, a lot of them suffer from pacing problems just to get to 20 minutes. As for this episode, the best I can say is it presents exactly what you're going to get for the rest of the show. If you feel like you can stomach these visuals, these awkward gags and facial expressions, and just how nice everyone acts and how tame everything is presented, then you'll probably like the series just fine, while fans of the original series will quickly realize it has practically nothing to do with the franchise they love and just leave it alone. But like I said, I'm giving the whole show a chance, so let's continue our look and see what improves and what gets worse, and I promise I'll try to make future episodes less of a rant. Give Pizza a Chance is actually pretty good, no seriously. During an argument where Buster and Plucky fight over who's more perfect, yes really, their dorm wall bursts open with practical joke snakes. Granny gives them money to repair their room, but they cheap out and use the rest to throw the biggest pizza party the building has ever known, where their egos once again come out to clash. My first time watching through this show, this was the first good sign things are moving in the right direction. For starters, it's genuinely funny, made even better by how most of it is character-based. In my opinion, the best comedies revolve around competition, so it's fun seeing Buster and Plucky constantly competing against each other, like who has the most trophies or who can eat the most pizza, all while insisting it's a friendly competition, not a measuring contest, no not at all, and a couple other characters have their moments. Granny's explanation about why there are snakes in the walls is hilarious and gives us more insight into her history, while Hampton, who's usually the mediator between Buster and Plucky, suddenly finds himself out of work when the two declare they're now friends. So when Sweetie and Babs start having issues, he builds a psychiatrist's office out of pizza boxes just so he can listen to them. And yeah, just the fact that there's all this pizza filling up the room is hilarious in itself, and a good use of exaggeration that unfortunately will be absent for most of the show. Oh, and Plucky telling everyone to him when the walls eventually collapse is one of the most stupidly brilliant jokes I've ever heard. The only thing that brings this episode down is it reminds me of how much I hate this version of Babs. She's the most hurt by the reboot, going from a hyper-creative, multi-talented character not solely defined by gender to girl. Yeah, she's the token girl from every show that doesn't know how to write a female character, so she's a straight-A, obsessively tidy, perfectly organized role model whose only flaw is that she's too perfect. As seen when she cleans up Sweetie's side of the room, much to their resentment. Oh, and she screams. A lot. But to be fair, so does everyone in the show. Everything about this character is so not Babs, I'm not even gonna call her Babs anymore. As far as I'm concerned, she's Barbara Ann, which the original would absolutely hate, but this Wonder Bread would probably embrace. But heck, even this leads to some good moments, like learning that Sweetie's colorblind and an only child who grew up in a crowded part of the city, so they're used to messes. And Barbara is so used to being a twin that she thinks she can just do anything and the other party will be on the same page as her. Do you see how developing these characters makes the situation so much more fun and even funny? Oh, and I should point out that this is an episode where the main characters do something wrong, they know they're doing something wrong, they still have fun with it, everything gets out of hand, they try to hide it, they almost succeed, but then have to face the consequences. I know I shouldn't have to point out one of the most tried and true plots in comedy, but you are going to get violently sick of how often these characters are perfect paragons of virtue and or never have to answer for their actions. I'm not going to have many good things to say about this show, but this is one of them, and it is genuinely a good episode and probably the best of the series. If you have to watch any episode, watch this one, and I wish I lived in the world where $50 gets you that much pizza. Extra so extra is sadly more indicative of what the rest of the show will be. It turns out that the college no longer has a school paper, so Barbara and Sweetie decide to start one themselves. However, all they have is unmarketable drivel, so Plucky suggests they start breeding gossip, which Barbara steadfastly refuses to do. So Plucky just starts his own tabloid and quickly overtakes Barbara's paper. Oh, but embarrassing all the students is wrong and he shouldn't be doing this, and whatever else their moral of the day calendar says. First of all, what college still has a school paper, at least a physical one? I went to college 10 years ago, before most of the kids watching the show were even born, and even then, we just got an emailed newsletter. Yeah, this is an example of the show randomly deciding to base itself around outdated technology that their target audience probably wouldn't even recognize. It's not the most glaring instance, but we will be getting to one soon. Secondly, I hope you enjoyed the rebellious streak the character showed in the last episode, because from here on out, most of them are purer than a glass of water made entirely out of air. Everyone has to be an absolute perfect role model. No snide remarks, no friendly ribbing, nothing that would ever hurt anyone else in the slightest. Barbara would rather burn the office down than dare to print something that could affect someone's feelings. Actually, no, she wouldn't, because that would mean a pure thought could cross her perfect mind made out of sunshine and rainbows, a mind that everyone seems to possess in this series. With the occasional exception of Plucky when they decide he's the antagonist, as he is here, where he learns Hampton is the most trustworthy student on campus and knows everyone's secrets. But his literal mind vault is unlocked when he sleeps, and he spews forth the gossip Plucky needs for his paper. In any other show, this is where it would get interesting, as you'd think we'd see everyone reacting to having their deepest, darkest secrets publicly exposed, with maybe some consequences for having their secrets revealed, including Hampton's reputation getting tanked and everyone marching on Plucky for violating their privacy. And you can keep thinking that because none of it happens. Oh sure, one or two students say they're disappointed, but there's no fallout, nobody loses face over anything published. Even Plucky faces practically no consequences. The others find where he's getting his information and confront him, and he immediately confesses. Then Barbara prints his story in her paper, when I thought she specifically said she didn't want to print that kind of story, and it's what makes her paper a success. So I guess the moral is it's okay to bully the bully. Plucky gets a tomato thrown at him, which yeah, that'll teach him, and he's rehired to work on Barbara's paper, and not a single thing was learned. Buster's plot is a little better, where he enrolls in a mentor program expected to be tutored by Bugs, only for it to be the obscure Looney Tunes character Merlin the Magic Mouse. He's disappointed, but is encouraged to give it a chance, and finds he likes learning magic, which factors into the ending confrontation. Sure, he's just as perfect as everyone else, but we get a nice song and creative visuals out of it, so it's better than Barbara and Plucky's plot. And no, the humor doesn't help save this one. Again, I hope you enjoyed just how fun and creative the comedy was in the previous episode, as the show's decided the way it wants to be funny is by being loud and making funny faces. Like they're worried they'll lose their audience's attention if they don't have something to slap a caption on every 5 seconds. Yes, the original show could be noisy and obnoxious, especially for the time, and not everything worked, but the gags had structure, they had purpose, and there was a variety of humor from writers who clearly wanted to entertain a wide audience. Most of the comedy in this boils down to someone screaming or making a wild expression to fool the audience into thinking something exciting is happening. Oh, and toilet humor, because some 5-year-old also needs a laugh. Though I did like the confession booth gag at the beginning, and their interactions with the San Francisco raccoon were surreal enough to get an awkward chuckle out of me. But it's bad when I have to say Teen Titans Go is a funnier show, with much more varied humor than what originally pioneered zany high-quality comedy in Saturday morning cartoons. If you couldn't tell, I didn't like this one, and while I don't think it's fair to call this, or most of what we'll be looking at, straight up awful, it's a major disappointment that doesn't take advantage of its setup. Something we'll again become very familiar with during this watch-through. If you'll excuse me, I need to go watch Truth or Red to wash this taste out of my mind. Toonie Ball Lights comes close to being decent, but fails where important. It's elective day, and the gang have to choose what they want to do for extra credit. While Barbara and Plucky enroll in Daffy's Anvil class for an easy A, Buster and Sweetie get roped into Toonie Ball. Both groups quickly finding they're not getting what they signed up for. Right off the bat, I really hate when they have to specify something as toony or cartoonish in the show. When the characters said it in the original, it felt like they were inviting us into their world of cartoon fun and mayhem, but here it's like they have to remind us that these characters are cartoons in a cartoon world, and not the blandest of sitcom plots that even Disney Channel would dismiss for being too stock, but I digress. I really want to like Sweetie hanging out with Buster, since I like the idea of them being a central character with a personality everyone gravitates to. However, that would require them to have a personality, and not just be written as the same nicey nice role model as everyone else is expected to be. Something Barbara straight up states out loud is what she is. Case in point, Sweetie, who even the theme song describes as a tough birdie, is super excited to play a sport that requires a strong, enraged player. So, of course, the one who gets carried away and lets their enthusiasm and aggression get the better of them is Buster. What? We can't have the character who's here to be the gay, supportive best friend to everyone having flaws. That would ruin their status as the gay, supportive best friend to everyone. So the character, who again is shown starting off every episode by destroying school property, is taken aback by the fact that Buster wants to win, as is the rest of the team, as Coach Foghorn Leghorn preaches the frequently repeated and almost always false lesson of it's not about winning, it's about having fun. Now maybe if they tried to tie more into the game, that would be fine. Buster himself states that Toonie Ball is more about using toon physics to win than brute force, so if the lesson was that he was focusing more on scoring than how to score, that could have worked. But no, Buster, who was the one who explained the game to Sweetie, yet somehow doesn't know how the game works, is constantly chided for not having fun, and is straight up told to think more about his friends than winning the game. Which again, maybe could have worked if this was a practice run where he faces off against and is too rough towards his fellow students, but this is a championship game where you'd hope the players would be taking their situation a little seriously. Yes, having enthusiasm for what you do is important, but you still need to dedicate yourself to it, and if you want to get anywhere in sports, heck, any professional career, you need to find a balance between the two. But I guess Buster learned something since his team go on to win the game by doing the exact same thing they were doing, except Buster does something a little crazy to score the winning goal that he clearly took time to think up, thus still taking the game seriously. Hooray for completely unrelated morals! Meanwhile, Barbara and Plucky's plot is there. They find the Anvil class is a lot tougher than they thought, so they study together, there's a Rocky homage, and they both get C-minuses for their efforts. Barbara admitting maybe getting straight A's isn't as important as she thought. Except, as Daffy points out, they scored higher than any student in his class ever has, so they still set the bar and prove they're better than everyone else, because God forbid these characters have flaws or relatability. The only thing that works in this episode is Hampton's plot, who's afraid to make decisions, so Shirley places him in a sensory deprivation tank to conquer his fears. We get some pretty fun visuals and an actually good lesson about either making a choice or finding a third option that better suits you, but only after Hampton makes a pee joke. Also, I hate Shirley in this, and she's a good example of I like this character because they didn't do this. The original Shirley is one of my favorite characters, as yes, she's usually shown as a medium, but she's a girl first. A multi-talented individual with different attitudes towards the other characters and other hobbies than her new age persona suggests. Also, I love her Valley Girl style of speaking, but here, in keeping with the new cast only allowed one unique character trait each, she's a psychic, and that's her entire personality. When they could have assigned her any other profession and added on that she's also a psychic, and that would have made her hilarious. Oh, but that would also require humor, which is even worse in this episode than the last. The only thing that got a slight smirk from me was when Buster told Sweetie that Toonie Ball is like football, and football is like Toonie Ball, and everything else is just the usual noise and poorly timed slapstick. Yeah, this episode is a confused mess that has no idea what it's trying to teach, and is colossally unfunny to boot. It offers almost nothing, and you'll be wasting your time if you sit through it, so just skip it. Also, why the antiquated football helmets? Save the Lubru features the first actual villain of the show. The campus is shocked to learn their hangout the Lubru is shutting down, and that the buyer is none other than Montana Max, who wants to start a drink franchise in its place. Thus, Buster declares him his nemesis and tries to thwart him. Well, I guess I wanted something similar to the original Tiny Toon Adventures and the Monkey Paw Curled. This is one of the rare episodes where the characters have actual competition, meaning they have to step up their game and might even lose for a change. And yeah, Buster being this excited to have a rival because he's a huge Bugs Bunny fanboy is pretty funny. Also, Candy Milo, who voiced the original Sweetie, deserves a massive amount of praise, as she not only does a perfect rendition of Granny and other roles once filled by the late great June Foray, but a near-pitch perfect impression of Montana, as I guess his original actor is now too old to play the part, with a replacement for Dizzy doing a decent job too. And that's pretty much all the good I have to say about this episode, as I'm instead left with so many questions. Granny explains Montana has the right to purchase the Lubru since he's a student, so Buster decides to trick Montana into handing over control of the building. How? By disguising himself as a businesswoman and seducing Montana. Which, okay, I could see happening in the original show, but are we really still allowed to do this in media? I thought we decided about a decade ago that cross-dressing was no longer a joke, especially for actual cross-dressers. Not that I have a problem with it either way, but I don't know what the liberals want me to think anymore. Also, how old is Montana supposed to be? I'm guessing he's been aged up like the rest of the cast to young adulthood, but he still looks and sounds like his original young teenage self. And since Buster appears to be disguising himself as a middle-aged corporate officer, that makes this relationship all the more ewy. The fact Montana is attracted to a rabbit doesn't bother me as much. What does is that even Montana is horribly downgraded for the show. I wasn't a huge fan of the original, but he was the villain and he knew it. He was ruthless, malicious, and a bit abusive, usually wearing his trademark sneer as he thought up ways to make the other Toons' lives a living hell, and getting his just desserts at the end. This Montana screams at one point, and that's it. He does nothing else bad or morally reprehensible, and while he starts with his trademark look, he switches to a goofy expression around Buster that contrasts so badly with his design, especially when he gets his own meme faces, which, as an addendum to me mentioning them earlier, I don't usually mind when cartoons use close-up weird expressions. However, the cartoons that usually use them are obnoxious, with loud humor and irreverent characters, and if that's what they're going for, the tone that they've set, that's fine. But since this show wants to keep itself clean in both character and animation work, all I feel is the cartoon screaming at me to pay attention, only to bore me again with planks of wood who act like they'll be incinerated if they so much as drop a piece of paper on the ground. And speaking of boring, there's not a single joke or twist that works for this episode. It goes exactly how you expect it to go. Montana falls for Buster. Buster and his friends try to convince the love-struck Montana to sign over the Lubru, but Buster's makeup melts off and it's back to square one. Meanwhile, Dizzy loses his apartment with the closure of the cafe, so Barbara and Sweetie invite him to move in with them, and it's every single unwanted roommate cliche from every single other instance in existence, though worse, because again, nobody's allowed to suffer and may only be mildly inconvenienced. Then Dizzy suddenly seems to reform and cleans everything up, which I thought might lead to the roommates becoming hesitant to give him up and a decent twist on the idea, but no, he remains a pest, and the two are glad to see him eventually go. I don't even want to say how this ends, because I fear you'll get dumber just from hearing it. Okay, fine. So Montana's clearly lying about being a star athlete and quite obviously taping his face over pictures of actual sports stars, and the way they finally defeat Montana is by revealing that he has, in fact, been taping his face over other athletes' pictures. All through this reveal, I was literally shouting, no, you can't seriously be going through with this. There's some other twist you're gonna introduce, right? You can't possibly think your audience is this stupid. Only to once again give him way too much credit, as Montana is indeed found to have applied to the college with a fraudulent athletic scholarship, and the deal is terminated. Which, why did Montana need a scholarship? He's filthy rich and could have easily afforded tuition. I thought they would reveal that was fake too, but no, he still has lots of money as he flies away in his helicopter, and things end with Bugs and Buster giving a drag performance. Wow, this was genuinely one of the worst written episodes of anything I have ever seen. And Montana's not even the worst part. It's bad when you have to make your characters idiots for a plan to work. It's worse when you expect your audience to be brain dead stupid as well. Heck, I can't believe I'm saying this, but this plot would have been better if it was nicer. Buster thinks Montana's his nemesis, tortures him a little bit, then finds out Montana is also a nice guy, and he bought the hangout so he could manage it and give it a well-deserved makeover. That would have been interesting, or at least unexpected. As is, unless you want to see a perfect example of how not to write anything, this is the most definite skip and the bottom rung of this already underwhelming series. If you'll excuse me, I need to apologize to everyone in Montana that their state is associated with this show. Prank You Very Much could have so easily been good. It's prank week, and Acme Looniversity must remain the prankster king against their rival Perfecto Prepida Aqualu. Hey, you want to know how to ruin practical jokes, make everything perfectly acceptable with no chance of repercussion whatsoever, which is the attitude this episode takes, as everyone is encouraged to prank each other and just have fun with it. Great, thanks for the permission to commit a felony. It's like robbing someone's house as they just stand there handing you all their stuff with a smile, which I'm not suggesting anyone do in real life, but in a cartoon you can show this kind of thing. Because, and try to follow me, a cartoon is not real life. It's a fictional safe space to show things that can and shouldn't be done in reality. So you're allowed to be a little naughty, you're allowed to go crazy, you're allowed to destroy stuff and cause misery, because unless you're doing a continuity heavy drama, everything just returns to normal by the next episode. A concept that seems completely alien to the show, which is approaching the mom from Bubble Boy with how obsessively it's trying to keep its audience safe. So what should be funny scenarios are rendered neutered because it's all harmless fun and games. That said, the pranks are creative. I like the opening hair gel attack of this nesting doll cup of coffee, and it is nice to finally see a darker side to our otherwise squeaky clean characters, even if, again, everything's perfectly sanctioned. As such, the episode's moral isn't don't and play pranks but don't leave their friends out, as the twins hog all the planning to themselves, leaving the others grumbling they can't help. Which comes to a head as the gang infiltrate the Akalu prom with a disguised stink bomb, in an actually ambitious heist-like montage I have to admit I like. As well as the stink bomb hilariously backfiring on the rabbits, or at least it would have been funny if they didn't show the rival school plugging it up 30 seconds beforehand. So the bunnies let their friends do the pranks they've been talking about all episode, leading to the hilarious visuals of evil Hampton and Uncle Lou getting crushed by shrinking t-shirts, and Sweetie catapulting the university to win the prank war. And what do you know, everything ends on a twist I didn't see coming, and a pretty good one at that. This is one of the better episodes. I still don't like it, but it doesn't shy away from cartoon anarchy like most of the show does, and the visuals can get impressive and hilariously demented at times. I just wish that the characters pranked each other because they wanted to, and not because of some school-sanctioned event, like one university starts it and the other reciprocates, everything getting larger and out of hand until finally goes too far and everyone ends up in trouble for it. But with stories to tell in their old age, what we got isn't as bad as most of what we've already seen, but it's still a far cry from being genuinely good or funny and should only be watched if nothing else is on. Though I do like how the smart abusive leader of the two dumb minions trope is subverted, or I would if everyone didn't already have an attitude of politeness and unity. General Hogsbiddle yet again could have been so much funnier. Hampton finally gets his transfer to medical school and must say goodbye to his friends, but when Toons start malfunctioning, he may be back sooner than they thought. Well, with this episode, we finally have some personality for Buster. Yeah, in the same way Barbara is basically just girl, Buster is pretty much boy, but that was his basic personality in the original series, so I didn't mind as much. But here we learn he has abandonment issues. He is absolutely destroyed when Hampton leaves and pretty much gives up on having a life, or at least he would if the show would let anyone be funny. He has a breakdown at Barbara's dorm, is seen sulking for several scenes, experiences a Civil War flashback, and that's it. It would have been so easy to push his misery to the nth degree, like having him hallucinate seeing Hampton everywhere, or seeing others as Hampton. Heck, how funny would it be if he got so desperate he kept trying to put a pair of pig ears on Plucky and call him Hampton? Again, this show doesn't seem to recognize it's a cartoon, and cartoons are allowed to overact, besides having everyone randomly screaming. Another example, since Hampton's moved out, Plucky decides to open a bed and breakfast so he can afford a pair of designer shoes. He opens a bed and breakfast in his dorm room. Now that's the start of a joke, and a potentially funny one if developed. Like maybe he goes to great lengths to make the building, or at least the room, actually look like a B&B, or he has to constantly hide the fact he's operating a business out of a place that doesn't allow their renter to operate a business. Or at the very least, show him in some kind of misery, some kind of repercussion for his selfish actions, because once again, none of those things happen. He just leases his dorm to a couple renters, has to suffer through some of their more annoying habits, and gets all the money he needs without having to worry about damage or expense. At this point, where everyone's mildly inconvenienced should be the series tagline. Meanwhile, Hampton attends Festoon Medical School, where, of course, everyone is humorless, callous, and more obsessed with treatment than cure. When it's been my experience that actual medical students have a great sense of humor, as it's often what keeps them from also ending up as a patient. And why doesn't Acme Lou have a medical program? Because, as Wile E. Coyote reveals through VHS, again showing the series' weird fixation on outdated technology, Toon DNA allows them to bounce back after an accident. So doctors are unnecessary to all but an unfortunate few who have damaged DNA and need medical treatment. So is this the world only populated by Toons? Are all the human characters Toons as well? I guess Granny is, but what about humans that we see later? Sickness and hygiene still exist in this universe. Are there no doctors for that? Does death exist? So many questions I know I'll never get an answer for, and I'm probably nitpicking with, but why even bring up Hampton's dreams of being a doctor if you're just gonna say that being a doctor in this universe is redundant? Oh, and we see it's easier than they think to destroy someone's tuniness, as Wile E mixes a batch of anti-DNA to catch Roadrunner, which leaks into the water supply and everyone using it, causing them to lose their bounce back. Now this is what I think the episode should have been. Something causes the students to lose what makes them toony, and they need actual medical attention, meaning that Hampton, the only medical student on campus, finally has his chance to shine, and we see him helping all the bedridden Toons. You know, instead of the whole thing being a 3-minute gag before credits, where thanks to Witch Hazel and Plucky's shoes, Hampton reveals the cure is laughter and everyone returns to normal. With the college starting its own medical program, meaning Hampton can come back. When I first saw this episode, I hated it and thought it was the worst. Watching it again, I still don't like it, but I accept it as just another severely underwritten episode and nothing horribly offensive. And there are a few parts I found kind of funny, like how they introduce Wile E and his severely damaged science center, or Roadrunner and his black hole paint, or how Buster crosses vast wilderness to reach Hampton's school only to find it was right next door. Yes, it's corny, but at this point I'll take what I can get. And I like that there's a compromise and Hampton doesn't just give up on his dreams of being a doctor. It's the kind of happy ending that works without feeling too cynically happy. Even so, I don't feel like I got a thing out of this episode, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was just made to quickly wrap up Hampton's arcs and it didn't work in the universe they created. Like most of the series, it's yet another empty experience to skip, though the Steerhead joke is funny, I guess. Souffle Girl Hey is another episode I really don't like. It's college inspection day, and Granny's so confident they'll be the highest ranked university again, she just goes on vacation and lets Plucky and Hampton give the tour. Because yeah, abandoning your school the one day of the year, your job and reputation are on the line. They also missed a great opportunity with this album Granny Shows Yosemite. Originally, I thought it was the yearly picture a motorcycle club took together, and if they show them year by year growing old together, with fewer and fewer members showing up to their reunion, that would have been a genuinely sweet moment. But no, it's just some picture Granny likes to show off, and she abandons the protesting Plucky and Hampton, telling them to show the inspector around, who turns out not to be obscure Looney Tunes character Cool Cat, who previously held the spot, but his son Chillis Cat, a tech bro who wants to bring the university up to date, starting with throwing their itinerary out the window and demanding his guides play it by ear. Again, this is the start of a joke. If this was the school from Gumball, where it's obvious everyone has problems, and now those problems are about to be publicly exposed and or rectified, that would be funny. But as far as we're shown, Acme Lou is the most perfect gosh darn greatest school anyone could hope to attend, with no problems whatsoever. So instead of something going wrong that they must hide to rectify before he notices, they just show him mundane things they're proud of while he's unimpressed. So they step it up by turning the Lou Brew into some kind of liberal art display, I guess? Which, what was wrong with the Lou Brew that they needed to change it, and why did they think this would be what he'd be impressed by? I mean, he is impressed, but I feel like a page of the script is missing. Oh, but he discovers that they tricked him, and now he's peeved and not impressed with what they had before, so that happened. Meanwhile, Buster and Barbara get a call from their mom, who emotionally manipulates them into getting after-school jobs so she can afford to repair the house. And the job they end up getting is with Lola Bunny. Oh, not the hyper-fun-loving best part of the Looney Tunes show, but the perfect bland Mary Sue from the Space Jam movies, who serves as the cafeteria's rad skateboarding 5-star chef that everyone loves and thinks is the greatest. I'd say they unironically ironically introduced Poochie into their show, but everyone in the show is Poochie. To the episode's credit, we get a fun montage of the duo trying and failing to cook like a pro, and even a good lesson, as Lola tells them that to succeed, they need to find something unique that they can bring to their skill. And then she's called away to be on a cooking show, leaving her two completely unskilled chefs to prepare the inspector's feast, instead of, I don't know, getting another chef, ordering out, having this weasel guy who's just suddenly here now do it. No, just gonna stake your workplace's reputation on two students who have never cooked before? Great, fine, you're also an idiot. And while I said I liked the earlier montage, there's now not enough time for another one. So instead of what could have been a fun sequence of Barbara and Buster trying and failing to cook something for Chillis Cats, we just cut to a pile of dirty dishes and the rabbits panicking, until they just serve them their home recipe of carrots and grits. And the episode kills what little praise it garnered with what it tries to pass off as its second lesson. Lucky starts begging him not to lower the college's ranking or his parents will send him to another school away from his friends, and Chillis Cat says they passed the test. Yes, he Willy Wonka them, saying this is all an evaluation to see if they were genuine about their love for Acme Lou, and while he doesn't like the food, it was clearly made with heart, and thus he keeps the college at number 1 because the students are true to themselves. No, that is not how this works. Fine, the students are happy to call the university home, that doesn't mean the place had the standards expected of a place of higher learning, especially since it's still operating on outdated technology, while the staff were more than happy to skip town on the day of your visit and leave you with uninformed students who have no idea what they're doing. The real indicator of how well the school is functioning. Heck, the way it's presented, it feels like the episode's trying to pin the blame on the students, that they have to be the one to make sure their college is succeeding as a place of learning and not the other way around. And even ignoring that, I don't believe for a second this futurist tech bro would come to this decision, especially since he himself said he was there to bring the university up to date. But because the show thinks its audience will self-combust if exposed to one negative feeling, the inspector leaves happy, Buster and Barbara's country dish is a sensation, and their mom gets the money to literally plug up her flooded house. Sorry, but this episode to me is an example of an accepted good lesson that's actually harmful. I think the freaking and faulty moral of just be yourself and everything will work out needs to die in a fire. Yes, you should establish an identity, but that still means you need to compromise depending on your location and relationships. If something's not working out, you either need to adjust yourself or leave. That's a sad truth. Maybe I'm reading too far into it, but whatever it's trying to teach, it's still a spectacularly boring and lazy episode that only works because a unicorn farted sprinkles and glitter on everyone and gave them brain damage, which is what you will get if you also choose to watch this episode. Tears of a Clone comes so close to working. Buster can't find anyone to take to a boy band concert, so Wile E provides him with a clone so he can play with himself. I know what I said. First of all, Buster seriously can't find anyone who wants to go to a concert with him? Maybe I just have no standards, but if anyone offered me a free ticket to practically any show, even if I'm not a fan of the act, I'd take the opportunity. But no, everyone has their reasons for not wanting to see the band, with Barbara's being the most pathetic, as she says she already made plans with Sweetie to eat ice cream. Yes, she turns down a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity so she can lie around her dorm room all night. Please remind me why we're supposed to like her over the original Babs again. Though the show got one of its very few laughs from me when Fifi's excuse was that she can't go because she dated half the group. After that, his plot starts to get entertaining, as Wile E gives him the cloning machine so he can take himself to the concert, with a very creative way to show a clone being made. Then the two Busters hang out in an also decent and slightly funny montage, until it's time to return the clone before it expires, which he can't bring himself to do because the clone makes puppy dog eyes at him and he wants to be friends forever, only to discover that when the timer runs out, the clone literally goes bad, and evil Buster goes out to ruin his life. So real Buster and Pluggy team up to stop the rotten duplicate in a pretty decent and surreal action scene. I admit, this was the most entertained I've been since the Pizza Party episode. For the most part, Buster's plot is genuinely creative, energized, and even got a few chuckles out of me, you know, like what should have been the norm for the show, but even this episode can't help itself and falls flat right at the end. Evil Buster wreaking chaos should have been fun, but once again, nobody seems to be affected by anything, they're just mildly annoyed at his actions. Even when Fifi rants at him for dyeing her tail purple, well, we don't see her again, and Buster doesn't have to repair or otherwise face consequences for anything his clone does, even though it was technically his fault. And when they finally stop his evil clone, Buster admits that he should have taken Pluggy to the concert, even though we saw him debating it earlier and realizing that would have been a very bad idea, which Pluggy himself confirms. And the problem wasn't that he didn't ask, the problem was he didn't RTFM before he cloned himself. I thought this went without saying, but if you want to preach a moral, it's best if it relates to the story. Meanwhile, in Barb and Sweetie's plot, they get a time machine from a garage sale and try to figure out what to do with it. And after covering a list of everything not to use it for, they're inspired by Fifi to open a vintage clothing store, using the time machine to go back to the past and get the clothing brand new. And somehow that wouldn't upset the timeline? I don't know, but I have to admit, I like this plot as well. Yeah, who would have thought that having a creative plot would make for a better viewing experience? And it's nice to see Fifi get her first prominent role, where her one character trait is that she's into high fashion, so they just swapped one French stereotype for another. But they even managed to drop the ball here, as Barbara and Sweetie finally keep bringing important items back from the past, which alter the timeline in hilarious fashion, so they finally have to shut down their business and send everything back. Even though they establish it's only the certain items that are changing everything, and all they have to do is throw them back in the machine and they're instantly restored, which they could just do and keep their obviously lucrative business going. But no, they conclude that everything must go, which I guess includes what they already sold. Did they have to wrestle it back from the customers? Because that would have been fun to see. And they set their machine to destroy itself so nobody else can misuse it, except Clone Buster is knocked inside right at the last minute, who Barbara thinks is the real Buster and tries to save him in vain, crushed that she lost her brother. Except she's not, because Lord forbid this show lets us feel anything. This episode comes so close to being good. I generally like the plot ideas, and there are quite a few good jokes and background gags that got at least a smirk out of me, but it trips at the finish line and the endings get really sloppy. If they just change a few things, like making it clear there will be consequences for Buster, or revealing the clothing Barbara and Sweetie were selling were the things that changed the timeline, this could have been a legitimately enjoyable watch. But as is, it's still placed in the show's top 5. Not a great accolade, but enough to signify it's one of the least insufferable to sit through. Also, Fifi's racist towards Furball. The show must hop on is another idea held back by how boring this show is. Barbara is assigned to cast and direct the upcoming play of the founding of Acme Lou, but she and the players have different ideas of who to be and what to do. Strangely enough, I would be more fun with Barbara's new personality if the show actually was a sequel to the original series. Ideally, we don't act the same way at 18 as we do at 14, so it would make sense for Babs to grow out of her more wild persona and come up with ways to be more maturely creative. And directing could be a sign of her Barbara taking the next step in her show career, much like when she, Buster, and Plucky all made their own movie. Heck, I just realized how much more interesting each character would be if we knew what their major was. We know Hampton wants to be a doctor, what does everyone else want to do? Maybe Barbara could pursue a degree in drama, and her being assigned as director is part of her degree. But no, everyone in the show started as a blank slate, and the blank slate is what they remain. And despite never showing any interest in theater before, it suddenly announced Barbara is directing, coming dangerously close to the girl boss trope where she's just in charge because systemic oppression or something. As for the rest of the episode, there's really not a lot to say. Even for a show mostly devoid of substance, it feels like even less happens here than usual. Everyone auditions for the play, but Barbara doesn't give them the roles they expected, so they just whine and complain while Barbara goes crazy with power. Actually, no, she doesn't even do that because that would be funny. She just makes wild gestures during these stage building montages, some of which manage to get a smirk out of me, and to Barbara's credit, she helps Hampton with his anxiety problem. However, the rest of the cast feel like they're not getting respect they deserve and advance concessions, which they're denied, and they either do it anyway or walk off the project. And I guess there are no rehearsals as opening night arrives and it's a complete disaster. And it's here that Barbara finally reveals to everyone why they have the roles they were assigned for the show. Hampton's playing Bugs because Bugs also had a stutter when he started college. Plucky's very expressive, that's why he's playing the non-speaking cactus, and so on. It's really not a bad scene, except for the fact that in the words of the great Robbie Hart, there are things that could have been brought to their attention yesterday! But they accept their roles and the rest of the play goes spectacularly. Not that we see what it's about, but Barbara's written up well in the magazine, so I get to see yet another thing that goes perfectly for everyone. Sadly, this is another of the show's best episodes. I still don't like it, but there's less that annoys me than usual. We do get to see the steps involved in putting on a show, which takes advantage of at least some of its comedic potential. And not only are the morals good, but the show takes time to actually slow down and let the emotions shine through. Unfortunately, Barbara is still the weakest part. Sweetie keeps bringing up that she's being too ambitious and going over budget, but that's never followed up on, and we never see any consequences for her elaborate vision. So once again, she learns absolutely nothing. Still, I'll take a mediocre episode that at least tries over the chaotic mess of half thought out ideas and messy morals the show so far has been. It's not good, but it's one of the least bad. Also, their play apparently features a school shooting. Spring Break is the show's first double-length episode. It's Spring Break at Acme Lou, and everyone has plans. Plans that, of course, go awry, and everyone has to cope. Yes, that does sound like a certain special of the original show, but I feel sick every time I compare this thing to that, so that's the only comparison I'll make. That said, this episode is actually alright. Yes, really, I found myself enjoying a pretty good portion of it. First, we have Barbara and Buster heading back home to see their family, where since his parents ditched him, they find Plucky has hitched a ride with them, and he becomes the hit of the town. Yeah, I do love all the bunnies reacting to seeing a duck for the first time, really giving the impression this is a small town comfortable living in their own little world. And I know I keep saying one of my major problems with the show is everyone is too nice, but I do like how Plucky is generally well behaved. Okay, he still acts entitled, but he's mannered enough to recognize he's the guest and to treat his host with respect, especially since it gets him attention in a cozy room, which he both loves. I also really like how it accurately shows what it's like to come home from college. Everyone wants to know how you've been, but afterwards you're no longer the center of attention, and your bedroom has been converted into insert parent stream project here. I even like their mom, sure in keeping with the show's policy of one trait per character. Her personality doesn't extend past mother, but she's a nice but stern figure who I can believe raised a large family, probably by herself. And she gets along pretty well with Plucky, even inviting him to the fair to do their annual singing act. But then Buster and Barbara have to kill the momentum by pretending to be sick. Yes, these college-age students seriously get the idea that if they play sick, they'll get attention and keep their mom from taking Plucky to the fair, which obviously doesn't work as she just abandons them to perform the act with Plucky. And then there's a lot of screaming and regret that they lied to their mom and how perfectly innocent they were beforehand and fear that she'll replace them with Plucky, and we're right back to the show thinking it's baby Looney Tunes. However, it's then immediately followed by meeting their brother Bubba, who gives them a good lesson on how their mom is love for everyone, as he learned being the oldest and having to deal with every kid who came after, and they run before they miss the performance. So wait, they did something wrong, face consequences, and then have to atone for their actions? Wow, it's almost like they want to be actual relatable characters or something. Meanwhile, Hampton and Sweetie head to Acme Acres to see their parents, but they oversleep on the bus and end up stuck in Canada. Yeah, their plot isn't as good, as it mostly boils down to basic Canada stereotypes and Sweetie screaming at the top of their lungs. But I do like when Sweetie interacts with other characters than just Barbara, giving them other personalities to bounce off of. And it gets a little more interesting when they somehow find themselves in the rainforest, where Shirley just so happens to be projecting her aura and she performs a ritual that switches their bodies. Unfortunately, the result isn't as funny or developed as it could have been. In fact, I wish they saved this for an episode where they're back at school, but it does get the point across. Hampton's afraid of flying, while Sweetie's not afraid of anything. But after swapping lives, they discover what each other's problem is, and as a result, feel closer as friends, reversing the curse and allowing Hampton to let Sweetie fly them to Acme Acres. So, like Buster and Barbara's plot, it is a comedily written full story, and besides being comedily written, this episode is comedily funny. There are multiple jokes and gags that manage to make me chuckle, from the students actually taking advantage of their toon abilities to reenact Duck Amuck, to the trail of chaos Buster and Barbara cause running to the fair, to even Yosemite's plot, where he sees one lonely individual keeping the university safe by himself, and that Dan Schneider apparently ghost wrote a scene. Now, the episode does end as hunky-dory as usual, right down to how all their parents just so happen to be in the exact same location, and they sing a song that sounds like High School Musical's Leftovers, but for once, I feel like they earned their happy ending. Holy crap, what happened? What writer went rogue and decided to break the show's standards of infuriating mediocrity and actually give us something I can consider a real episode? Even one that can be held to the standards of the original series. Sure, it still has its problems, but it's one of the few where the pros legitimately outweigh the cons. I like the pizza episode a little better, but this is still top 5 worthy, possibly top 2, and if someone straps me down and forces me to watch the show again, I'll at least sit happy knowing I'll have this episode to look forward to. And it's nice to hear Lorraine Newman again, the sadly overlooked member of the original Saturday Night Live. Whatever happened to Babsy Bunny starts off season 2, and we're right back to crap. The gang tour Acme Acres when Barbara suddenly goes missing and her friends have to find her. Well, might as well get this out of the way. This episode features the return of Elmira, and not only that, but Cree Summer returns to voice her, making her the only returning cast member, and I'm still not thrilled. I think I made my dislike for Elmira perfectly clear in my Tiny Toon Adventures retrospective. While the original Babs is one of my absolute favorite cartoon characters, Elmira is in my bottom 10. Her one joke was that she abused animals. That was it, and 99% of the time, it wasn't funny. I absolutely despise this character, and I could have gone the next 10,000 years without having to see her again. Oh, but we don't have to worry about this iteration. Not only has she been given the same personality regression everyone else has received, but she's not even the worst part of the episode. No, the worst part is how the writer is under the impression it's still 1992. Barbara wants to take pictures of her and her friends touring the city, but oh no, she's using an antiquated instant developing camera that she has to put in front of her face to operate. And she can't just hand the camera off to one of her friends to take a picture because she's just too nice a bunny to ask to have someone. Yes, the major conflict of the episode is that she's so gosh darn polite that she's afraid to inconvenience someone by asking them to take her picture. That is what we're supposed to worry about. So I guess it's a good thing that Elmira happens by, and since she owns a photography studio, convinces Barbara to feature in her line of cute calendars, which she does, but even when she starts feeling uncomfortable, she can't just leave because again, she's just too polite to be that inconsiderate. Isn't that just the impression the original Babs left us with? And of course, she doesn't tell her friends, so they have to search the entire city to find her. Well, I'm just sitting here screaming, you have smartphones! We saw you have smartphones! Why don't you just call her up and ask her where the heck she is? And that's another thing. You have smartphones! Selfie cameras have been a near universal feature of wireless phones for over 2 decades. Why the hell are you still using an old Polaroid? Just pull up the camera on your phone and get a group shot. Heck, one of the problems the gang have is that because Barbara has been taking all the pictures, they don't have any to show what Barbara looks like. Again, smartphone! Just show them her social media account. Or heck, one of you probably has a picture of Barbara on your phone. The generation the show is targeted toward has literally never had this issue. Oh, but that's not the episode's only issue. The humor is at an all-time low, like Cartoon Network real sitcom level of just awkward. There's a long bit where Barbara has trouble understanding how many tacos she gets with her order. Meanwhile, Plucky is having an image crisis because apparently he doesn't understand what a caricature is, and when they still can't find Barbara, they go to a pickle guy who knows everything, except he doesn't. I could imagine there's a universe where all of these are considered funny. This is not that universe. Then there's a joke where they go to a restaurant banned by stereotypical Irish people where they're informed it's an Italian restaurant, which is then followed by an implication that all redheads are Irish and know each other. What am I supposed to take away from that? Also, Elmira, despite being voiced by her original voice actor, sounds off. Cree Summer's gravelly yet friendly voice has been an important part of my childhood, but after about 4 decades of doing it, I think it's taken its toll on her voice because she's starting to sound like Marge in newer seasons of The Simpsons. And it sounds like she's trying to do something new as she keeps slipping into an Elmer Fudd accent and replacing the R's with W's, even though that wasn't how she originally spoke. But I should probably stop calling her Elmira anyway because this isn't Elmira. In keeping with everyone else, she's been downgraded from an absolute menace to just an annoying lady who likes taking pictures of animals. But even then, there is so much more they could have done to make her funny, like make her a paparazzi stalking the gang and constantly suffering for her art. But no, she's just as one note and only slightly less polite than the rest of the gang, who eventually do track down Barbara but find themselves in the same predicament as her, where they can't possibly just walk out the door and not give Elmira the satisfaction of their company. No, they have to sacrifice Plucky in order to leave with a clear conscience. Which wasn't saving a friend the whole reason they were there in the first place? Well, I guess it doesn't matter since everyone gets a happy ending anyway. Elmira gets her pictures, Plucky gets attention, Buster gets free VIP tickets to a sold-out Bugs Bunny event from Bugs himself, and Barbara's camera trouble is solved as she stole a tripod from Elmira. Wait, why did she steal a tripod? Elmira in this wasn't even a villain. At best, she was rude and inconsiderate, and if anyone had even one vertebra of a spine, they could have left any time. You know what? I'm done. I'm done giving this episode the privilege of my attention, and I wash my hands of it. My first watch through, I managed to choke down everything thrown at me, but this is what finally made me give up. And on repeat viewing, it's just gotten worse. This goes to the very bottom of the list, and heaven help whatever manages to take its place. Slate Cheese is weirdly another picture-centric episode. It's picture day at Acme Lou, and Barbara wakes up to find she has a pimple. A talking pimple. If the last episode was enough to drive me away on my first watch through, this would have been the clincher. And even now, watching through the entire series, I had to pause the video here and just walk away for a good couple minutes to rethink my life. But I came back and continued watching, and thankfully it got, well, not better, but more entertaining. Obviously, Barbara doesn't want a living zit taking up real estate on her face, so she gets some shrinking cream from Professor Coyote, only to find it doesn't just shrink facial acne. Okay, I do have a fondness for shrinking plots, so this is where it started to pick up for me. I like the ingenuity on display, where Barbara has to figure out how to cross what was originally a very short distance using now very large everyday items. Some pencils, paper, airplanes, yeah, it gets fun watching her traverse her now immense dorm room, except instead of grappling up to her desk, why didn't she simply climb up her bedpost to get to the growth cream on her bed? Yeah, she gets to spar with the giant worm, so I guess it doesn't matter. The only thing that ruins the experience is, of course, the pimple. There is no reason to have it sentient. It adds absolutely nothing to the experience, and instead just takes me out of it every time it opens its mouth. Which, how does it have a mouth, or saliva, or sweat glands? Yeah, small potatoes. I think it would have been funnier if it was just a comically large growth, or inversely, if it was tiny and nearly imperceivable, but her ego won't let her ignore it. All this does is add more noise to a show that won't let situations speak for themselves. Still, if the whole plot was Barbara and her zit friend exploring the now gigantic scale of her furniture while trying to get to her school photo in time, I would have been perfectly fine watching that. Sadly, it's not the only plot, as we also have to deal with Buster and friends worried about how their picture will turn out. With Professor Daffy making Buster self-conscious about his hairstyle, so Sweetie volunteers to improve his looks. Two incredibly inappropriate results. First of all, the argument that makes Buster nervous contradicts itself. Daffy shows them that Bugs' school pictures were originally awkward until he finally found his signature pose that landed him fame and fortune. So obviously a bad school photo isn't the end of the world as they're constantly trying to preach. If Buster doesn't get a good photo, he still has a chance at the stardom he wants, and yet he spends the whole episode trying to get the do that rings true. And secondly, since Sweetie is giving him bad haircuts, what's the moral of this segment? To not be afraid to tell Sweetie to stop. Yeah, Barney the dinosaur just called. He says you're patronizing your audience. So Buster segment is mostly just him having to deal with Sweetie styling his hair like they think he's part of the more flamboyant LGBTQ community, with an admittedly funny outburst from Plucky until he finally tells them to stop, which they gladly do and give him back his original haircut, and not a single thing was accomplished. Oh, but they decided this episode needed 3 plots, as we also have Hampton wondering what he wants to wear for his photo, where the moral is be yourself. There, I just saved you about 5 minutes. So he does turn into Guy Fieri in one of the rare real-world references the show makes, and all told, Barbara's plot where she's shrunk down and has to race the clock comes comprises less than 7 minutes of this 20-minute episode. You had something great and you smothered it in mediocrity. Okay, to be fair, this episode actually isn't that bad. It has its creative moments and it doesn't bungle the morals. They just had that one thing that could have made this one of the best episodes of the show if they fully dedicated themselves to it. It's another example of why I wish this show was in segments like its predecessor and not full-length episodes with 2 or 3 plots all clamoring for screen time. Still, I can recognize I at least tried with parts of this episode and I assign it the status of watchable. Though I thought Barbara's bed was on the other side of the room. Toon in Space is one I was really looking forward to liking. Barbara's homesick, so Buster decides to remind her why she went to the college in the first place by signing the group up for a new class taught by Marvin the Martian, who has seen better days after being humiliated by his enemies. But with a pep talk from Buster, Marvin is ready to take off into space again, including once again confronting his nemesis, much to his students' concern. So how do you ruin a creative idea? You do nothing with it. For the first half, the gang are stuck with one running gag apiece. Barbara sulks in the doldrums to defeat him. Marvin tries to teach him complicated technobabble. Pluggy confuses seeing the stars with movie stars while naming off animal versions of celebrities, and Hampton freaks out. It's just that one note over and over again, all while Buster is trying to cheer everyone up. Oh, and Sweetie's suddenly addicted to video games, finally giving them one trait out of being the gay supportive best friend to everyone. Most of the writing for this show has already been nothing special, but wow, this sets a new standard of just nothing happening. It's the same jokes over and over and over again for at least the first 10 minutes. Interrupted only by Buster finally getting Marvin out of his funk and flying his ship for the first time in eons. So now they're in space. That should lead itself to some creative jokes and scenarios. Well, it doesn't. They go to 2 places, both of which end in something random happening before they're suddenly right in front of the invading aliens and already in combat with some of the most unimaginative drone designs I've ever seen. And the rest of the episode I can only describe as things happen solely to make Barbara look good, because she does get out of her funk and is suddenly completely in control of the situation. They're nearly stuck out of the ship, but she saves them with some beach supplies Marvin for some reason has a large amount of, and then, through some weird logic I still don't quite follow, realizes that their ship is so reflective they can do more damage by shooting themselves, which I guess is a creative solution, but shouldn't that mean that their ship should be deflecting every laser already being fired at them? So that works until it suddenly doesn't, so they have to employ the one thing Sweetie was given to do for this episode and tear them away from their video game so they can do the exact same thing in real life. And as they do that, Pluggy throws Barbara a Martian uniform with rockets that also strangely includes green earbows, which she uses to save Marvin before blowing up the alien ship, which gives them credit as a lot more bloodthirsty than I thought any of them were capable of being. And I guess I also like that Marvin actually does make it clear that they have a chance of dying in this show, making this one of the rare episodes to have actual stakes. Also, this emergency glass gag, but once again, the morals don't fit the context of the episode. Barbara realizes why she went to college to begin with and feels reinvigorated, even though that wasn't the problem in the first place. She said that she still enjoyed Acme Lou, but she missed home. Which, if they have a spaceship at their disposal, why don't they just go home for a sec? While Buster learns that he should have just left the situation alone and let Barbara stew for a bit, despite how his actions got both Barbara and Marvin out of their depressions, and allowed Marvin to regain his confidence and save the galaxy. Great, the symbols of perfection are so perfect that they have to beat themselves up, but they can still find something wrong with their perfect plan. Yeah, this episode is a mess, one of the worst written we've seen to this point. However, it is also one of the show's least boring, and I can believe the kids will be more focused on watching the Looney Tunes fly a spaceship and battle aliens for a few minutes while wearing weird and awesome outfits than concerned with the story's glaring problems. I still don't like it, but I can understand why anyone would, so in that light, I guess I'll go ahead and say this one's alright. If just for the slap fight between Pluggy and Hampton. TwinCon is another episode that doesn't have its priorities straight. It opens with Sweetie randomly getting another new trait as we find they're into fantasy role-playing games, and that is near the end of a campaign with Buster, Barbara, and Hampton. I was generally getting into the first 2 minutes of this episode. It was a lot of fun seeing Sweetie taking their Dungeon Master duties so seriously, as well as the friendly jabs at role-playing games, like the immensely oversized million-sided die or the ridiculously confusing rules, and when Dizzy knocks the board over, I felt their pain. If this was the whole episode, I would be perfectly okay with that. Unfortunately, it's not even the main plot, as Buster and Barbara are informed that Acme Lou is hosting the annual TwinCon, which they've always wanted to go to, and they gleefully attend, only to find it's a convention for identical twins, because I guess they're the only fraternal twins in this universe. So it could have gotten a Looney Tunes themed Dungeons & Dragons style role-playing adventure, where the characters either play act their quest or something happens to actually place them in the fantasy world, and the episode instead wants to focus on Buster and Barbara having to defend their status as twin siblings. You know, I don't usually get the desire to punch someone in the mouth, but I want to punch someone in the mouth. Now, in a smartly written show, this could be commentary on how twins in media almost exclusively mean identical twins, maybe even show a couple twin characters from the Looney Tunes catalog to both support and contrast that idea. But no, it's just an excuse to create mirror duplicate characters because that's easier to design and animate. I do like a couple of the gags, like Buster and Barbara creating an accountant popcorn abomination and this apparatus they rigged up to try to move the exact same way. But once again, nothing lasts long enough to let anything sink in. It's just they try to being identical twins, fail miserably, then preach the obvious moral that, hey, all because you're identical doesn't mean you have to do everything the exact same way. And everyone goes, oh, I never thought of that, and Christmas is saved or something. But it at least means we get the role-playing plot next, right? Nope, because this episode has decided it wants 3 plots. While the buddies are at TwinCon, Pluggy and Hampton make a video that goes viral, and suddenly Hampton is internet famous. With all the complete misunderstanding any other mainstream show or movie demonstrates in trying to portray someone becoming a viral star, as Hampton gets a whole legion of devoted followers, $1 billion, and everything he's ever wanted. And then nobody remembers him and it all goes away. It's like that episode of Weekenders where Tish became temporarily famous, or that episode of Third Rock from the Sun where Sally became temporarily famous. Except those were good, and this makes me want to smash my head against a brick wall repeatedly. Oh, and when the episode gets bored, it cuts back to Sweetie waiting for her group to return before she just finds a new group and things end before it's resolved. Worthless! Completely worthless! What is this show's insistence that every plot has to be the blandest, least creative, most obvious take that could be done with any of these ideas? While anything with even a remote chance of standing out has to drown in a sea of mediocrity before it had a chance to grow into something better. They had gold and they instead decided to toss it in an overflowing sewer and film themselves doing it. Don't bother giving this episode even a second of your valuable attention. Except maybe for the short gag of Dizzy living with wolves. Skulls and Silly Bones is a weirdly mature topic for this show. The gang catch on that the college has a secret society and the boys are invited to join, but Barbara and Sweetie are left out, so they start their own not at all secret society. With how harmless the show wants to be seen, I'm surprised it actually went with an episode about secret societies and not a fraternity or even just a club. That said, it's still the exact same plot as if it was a fraternity or a club. The pledges have to go through a humiliating initiation to be inducted and receive certain benefits as part of the group, when I think it would have been a lot more interesting to have them immediately part of the group than see how they would act now that they have secret powers and such. Again, like an episode of Weekenders. Sorry to bring that up again, I'd just rather be watching that show instead of this one. Credit where it's due, I do like the trials the boys have to go through before they can be considered. Like crossing a moat of lava on red hot anvils, or suffering an extremely spicy hot sauce challenge, which Hampton passes with no problem, as I assume based on where he's supposedly from, he eats the stuff for breakfast. But the best part is where the trio are chased by a society member in an Elmira mask, instantly making this the better Elmira episode than the one that actually featured her. I also like how obvious the secret society is, walking around in robes in broad daylight with not so hidden entrances to their secret lair all over campus. It would be funnier if anyone called it out, but at this point I'm generally questioning how much communication there was between the writers and animators. Meanwhile, Barbara and Sweetie form their own club, where they invite everyone, and hey, they have giant ice cream and ball pits, I want to join. But it comes to a head when the trio are told that for the final test they must humiliate Barbara and Sweetie, which of course they don't, and instead humiliate the secret society, because again, I guess the show is fine with teaching it's okay to bully the bullies. And of course the society disbands and joins Barbara's club, where it's revealed the head of the society is Arnold the Pitbull, not voiced by Rob Paulsen, so I don't know why they bothered with this reveal. And since this was a shorter sum up than usual, I'll take this time to ask a question that's been bothering me since the first episode. Why is Little Sneezer in the show? I understand that his age was also ambiguous in the original series, where he could be a baby in one episode and going to school with the rest of the gang in the next, but that was a show more focused on telling jokes than any kind of world building. Everything existed to serve the gag, so depending on what they needed, Furball could be living in an alley or with Elmira, acting like a cat or one of the students, and that's fine, that's what the show was about. Here, they're obviously trying to establish some kind of grounded world that we're expected to take seriously, so why is there a baby walking around campus? Unless they're actually a young adult with severely stunted growth and a diaper fetish? Yeah, consider Sneezer a microcosm of everything wrong with rebooting the show. Older viewers are going to be turned off by how different and unfunny the new setting is, while newer viewers aren't going to get the joke of why there's a mouse in a diaper going to college. As for the episode, it has some good moments and it's not painful to sit through, but it's just pointless and once again lacks the creativity needed to stand out and be truly enjoyable. Though the part where Plucky can't find a best friend to humiliate, so he humiliates himself, almost makes this episode worth watching. Almost. Things that go tweet in the woods is actually halfway decent, literally. The Toons go camping and look forward to a night of s'mores and scary stories, but Sweetie fears that a blast from their past may be lurking in the woods. Hey, you know what brings the best comedy? Character. And you know what these cardboard cutouts actually get in this episode? Personality. Okay, not much personality, but enough where it's fun to see how each of them goes camping. Buster and Barbara are of course overachievers and outdoor experts, Hampton is overly conscious of everything that could potentially pose a threat outdoors, and Plucky wants the comforts of home in his backyard, with some actually decent gags to expand on their preferences, like Buster's unparalleled s'mores skills, or how Hampton's tent is built in mosquito swatters, or Plucky's portable luxury bathroom that he's thoroughly beta testing and won't let anyone else use. Gasp! Who would have thought that expanding on a character's character and not just having everyone be an interchangeable lump that can fill any role actually leads to a more enjoyable viewing experience. But it really gets good when they start telling their own stories, each covering a different horror trope, which, as they also admit, reflects their deepest, darkest fears. Barbara and Buster are best friends shopping in the mall, where they're stalked by an undead presence, who may even break apart their friendship! Next, Plucky learns that he has an uninvited guest in his house. A messy uninvited guest! And Hampton, not wanting to be left out, tells a story off the top of his head that's suspiciously similar to the Lost Boys movie, where Hampton may just become what he's always feared! Yeah, the premises are still childish, but they work. These are stories I genuinely believe these characters would tell, and something I'm surprised the original show didn't do. All topped off with some genuinely freaky imagery that would also feel at home in the original series, and this from a show that's been playing it so safe, I'm surprised each episode doesn't have a bubble wrap filter over it. Heck, the enjoyment doesn't stop there, as we get to see Plucky testing out his new bathroom, and needless to say, there are still quite a few bugs to work out. So yeah, for the first half, I was enjoying myself, and it felt like the people behind this episode actually wanted to make something that stood out and could entertain someone old enough to have developed object permanence. But the show just couldn't help itself. All throughout the campout, Sweetie is super defensive and cautious. Why? Because they were nearly assaulted by a giant orange monster when they were just a chick, and now they're finally ready for payback. And without Disney Jr., the lessons have been so far, what do you think the ending is? That's right, it turns out that the monster was the lovable pacifist Gossamer, who was just warning Sweetie away from a patch of poison ivy. And since the trap Sweetie put out harmed their friends, it turns out that they were the monster all along, and they really needed to think things through and make friends and respect the friendship they had all along, and I am going to puke. I am seriously going to hurl over how saccharine and obvious they insist every lesson outlined in the show has to be. Oh, and it just ends with no major resolution. They almost had it! Someone almost snuck in a good script, but it was caught at the last minute and apparently rewritten by a showrunner whose only exposure to children was watching Caillou. Go ahead and watch the first maybe 15 minutes, and when it gets to Sweetie's story, turn it off, and then go watch Night Ghoulery to remind yourself what mixing Tiny Toons and famous horror stories can actually achieve. Ask Not What Bunnies Can Do For You deals with politics. Oh, so they're gonna take a stand against groups and networks who insist on ultra-sanitized content to make the case that shows need a little irreverency to create interesting environments and relatable characters that more effectively serve as engaging teaching tools for children? Don't be stupid, what show would ever try to make that argument? Nah, this series has more important issues to focus on, like how Buster and Barbara are both running for school president and each of them is fine with supporting the other, but then gasp, maybe they're not completely fine in supporting each other. It's the plot from every single other class president episode in existence. No, correction, it's the template of every single other class president episode in existence. Because plot indicates they at least attempt something fun and original with it, and what show do you think you're watching at this point? Nope, Buster and Barbara just decided to both run for president because, yeah, they've proven themselves such contrasting personalities with differing ideologies that will affect the university in different ways. Which, to be fair, this episode does give them enough of that they try to push. Buster is presented as much more fun-loving who wants to change things just for the enjoyment of it, while Barbara actually wants practical changes that help her fellow students. So, of course, Buster is the more popular candidate. Now, a more interesting show would have let him win, and then we'd see how his improvements are actually to the detriment of the school, how they're fun at first, but start annoying everyone very quickly. So Barbara has put in is the true leader. Heck, maybe then we see that Barbara goes the opposite direction and creates so many rules and regulations that the school can no longer get anything done. Thus, it's either revealed that the bunnies have to work together to bring balance to leadership, or a more middle-of-the-road student is elected instead, like Hampton. But the show is allergic to interesting ideas, so instead we just see the two campaigning, doing the usual campaigny things like shaking hands, debating, slapping stickers and everything, and realizing that, oh no, maybe one of them is more popular than another. Thus, Sweetie tells Barbara that they have to play dirty, and they air a smear campaign where they reveal that Buster has orange boogers. Oh my god! It's official, nobody on the writing staff has ever seen a kid except on covers of gross joke books from the 90s. Hell, they don't even let what potential that could have had sink in, as Barbara immediately feels bad for it, and before Buster's image could take a hit, she goes on TV and apologizes profusely, and that she feels worse than that time she ate all the ice cream, which they literally say was the most traumatizing moment of their entire lives. Which, if that's the case, they've lived a sheltered life ultra-conservative homeschooling parents can only dream of for their kids. Then Buster also goes on and admits that Barbara would make the better candidate and drops out, leaving Barbara to win unopposed, and it ends as never brought up again, sporting all the tension of a wet noodle. Look, my problem isn't that they get along so well. Hell, they have a symbiosis I wish I had with my own siblings, but what's the point of an episode dealing with competition if there's no competition? We know from square one that they're not going to backstab each other and who's a more qualified leader, so what's even the point? And what's more funny is that this is one of the few episodes not to have a B-plot. Yeah, they were so proud of how uplifting and image-focused their main story was that nothing else happens besides the election, except maybe Barbara and Sweetie having to literally race to their next class on the other side of campus, which is once again ruined by how much they have to constantly explain what they're doing to the audience. Oh, and Plucky has a drama detection machine that just kind of sits there and says things and then it goes away, and the rest is just nothing. 99% wasted time and potential, possessing all the substance and entertainment value of an actual political debate. And even then, I think I'm slandering real-world politics. This is currently bottom 5 for the show, and I pity anyone who decides to sit through it willingly, though this Pac-Man joke got a smirk out of me. Let the meat quack convinces me that these are all just rejected scripts for 80s cartoons they found under a couch somewhere. Plucky has become king of a small country, yes, that old cliche, and his friends all learn firsthand that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Credit where it's due, I really like the gag that Plucky was chosen king by a random lottery. That is brilliant. And I like that Plucky is finally given an antagonistic role. Yes, throughout the show, he's rude and snobbish, and sometimes a minor obstacle to his friends, but for the most part, he doesn't act that much differently than everyone else. He still almost always does the right thing, and very rarely has to deal with any consequences. So it's nice to finally have an episode where his ego can run rampant, and we see how he acts without having to worry about what his friends think about him. At least ideally, because once again, they do practically nothing with the idea. Most of the episode is just watching Plucky being rude and declaring things to do, and throwing his friends in the dungeon if they disagree, which why are they even here? They're not being held there, they can leave at any time, and apparently Acme Lou is just a few miles up the road from this destitute kingdom, so if they're not happy with their lodgings, just leave. But if they did, then they couldn't admit that they were the jerks all along. Every time Plucky suggested something for them to do, they'd interrupt with their own ideas, so you see, it was entirely their fault. Which then begs the question of why they're even friends with him. If he has so little to offer the group, then why do they even hang out? The most productive thing he's ever done is convince the inspector to keep the college ranked number 1, but that only works because, again, everyone had brain damage from the constant unicorn farts that keep everyone happy and agreeable in the show. At least the original Plucky won a football game for his school. For a show clearly focused on friendship and good values, they're really pushing this toxic relationship. And if it sounds like I'm getting way off topic talking about this episode, well, I apologize if I made you think there was anything else to talk about. This is another episode with only one plot, and it feels like they really had trouble making a 20-minute runtime. Every gag is stretched out, like Plucky putting on an overly long courtroom drama where he gives multiple examples why nobody listens to him, or Sweetie constantly trying to convince his horse why the monarchy isn't working for a country, or Buster's Sunny musical number, or everyone admitting that they don't like kumquats, which what's wrong with kumquats? I love kumquats. And of course, Plucky disguising himself so that his friends can tell him what they had already discussed and concluded just a minute before. Also, Hampton has a weird fantasy with an attraction to his homemade stuffed doll of a famous TV actress that gives me anime girl body pillow vibes. You know, comedy is built on the basis of yes and, come up with the concept, then improve on it. This show feels like they stopped at yes. If an idea is remotely comical, they stop and decide it's funny in and of itself, when a good show could base entire episodes around just one of the jokes the show sneezes at us. However, to its credit, this episode is one of the best endings of the series, where all the running gags coalesce into one finale that shows Plucky is inadvertently a good king, until he's deposed by the new Democratic ruling party. This is not one of the worst episodes, but it's yet another that takes very little advantage of its potential, and it feels like practically nothing happens or is accomplished. As with most episodes that use its plots, it's just a giant waste of time and can easily be skipped, though this horse-drawn carriage joke was kinda cute. Ugh, Squash Me If You Can is awful. It's the annual Whisker and Wing Games, and both Sweetie and Furball are competitors, but oh no, they might have to compete against each other, and their friendship is just too strong for any sort of friendly rivalry. Yeah, I'm convinced by this point that the show has no idea what a game is, or at least one that actually requires competition where someone has to prove themselves better in the field than another. And that what happens in the game can stay in the game, or do the writers think that in Call of Duty, the winner is obligated to go out and actually shoot the loser? Oh, but that's not the only problem facing them, for the coaches of the Cat and Bird teams respectively are Sylvester and Tweety, and they will do anything to show the other up, even cheat. But oh no, cheating is wrong! Sweetie can't possibly cheat to win the day! This is the bird who only 2 episodes ago convinced Barbara to ridicule her own brother to win an election, aren't they? And now they suddenly have standards? Besides, they're clearly not cheating, as the things that Sweetie claims is cheating are clearly being allowed by the judges. It's not cheating if it's part of the game. Also, Sweetie throwing a stake to distract the dog who's chasing them as part of the race doesn't count. If you want me to be proud of Sweetie for playing fairly, then I need to know what the actual rules for these events are, because it feels like they're going by the pro gamer definition of cheating, where playing on a lower difficulty or using an in-game item that makes a battle easier somehow counts as not playing fairly. Oh, but maybe it's not the cheating that worries them, but the fact that they might hurt Furball. Oh yeah, by the way, Furball is in this show and speaks with a Brooklyn accent. That's his one trait. And what kind of monster would Sweetie be if they had to hurt someone? You know, the bird who constantly threatens to beat beat other toons up, who used a catapult to fleeing an entire university as part of the prank, who assaulted a cheeky construction worker, and who said out loud that they loved being a toon because they just bounced back from any injury. Yeah, how dare they temporarily inconvenience their best friend for the sake of a game? Hell, you want cheating? Then how about the fact that the final obstacle is clearly weighed more in favor of the birds? Furball has to climb this massive cat playset while Sweetie just has to fly up. Oh, but Tweety slips Furball some jiggle juice so he loses control of his muscles and crashes down, but Sweetie catches him just in time and leaves the competition, meaning that they've both been disqualified. Oh, I mean, they tied for first place, despite neither one of them completing the final challenge, meaning nothing was sacrificed for their friendship to mean something. All that's missing is the Simpsons remedial teacher proudly exclaiming, "Hooray! Everyone's a winner!" Oh, and Barbara and Hampton are in the audience, where they weirdly start treating Sweetie like their proud parents living vicariously through their kid, and it very quickly gets disturbing. The only tolerable sequence, besides this gag with the guard dog, is Plucky's plot. He's upset that he's not seen as the most selfless student on campus, so he gladly takes Dizzy's shift in the loo brew during the busy hours of the televised competition. And yeah, it is funny seeing him suffer for his ego, all while continually insisting he doesn't need any help. But even then, it's exactly the same turnout as when he opened a bed and breakfast. He just endures a couple annoying people, waits out the clock, and then it's over. He proves they can do it, gloats about being selfless, and then throws everyone out of the cafe. I thought Buster would bring up that he also has to perform the closing duties and clean the place up for morning, but nope, it just ends. Holy friggin' garbage! I didn't think the show's writing could get more infuriatingly abysmal and pandering than the Elmira episode, but here we are! This is the kind of story that people write as a parody, or otherwise seriously think their audience is so thin-skinned that they can't handle any sort of competition where they don't win by default. This is an awful message and an awful way to preach it, especially when they can't be bothered to establish what the rules they're not supposed to break even are. The only thing keeping it from the very bottom of the list is Plucky's plot, and even then, just by the skin of their teeth. Burn this episode with fire and go watch Laugh Olympics so you can feel something again. I Got a New Aptitude is thankfully another interesting one. The students get the results of their aptitude tests back with very surprising results. Plucky's destined to become a mad scientist, Hampton's a bad guy, and Buster's stuck as a side character. And their assignment is to follow a mentor who will determine if they meet the criteria. So yeah, it's another one that actually requires character from these characters as they go out and perform basically the opposite of their personalities. Plucky hates being a mad scientist because they're silent and lonely, Buster always sees himself as the leader, not second banana, and Hampton, of course, is the purest of this already saintly cast. But as they go off and work under their mentors, they start enjoying their new assignments, with their mentors even giving some surprisingly good pointers that you'd never think of. Granny explains that being a side character grants the most freedom, as if she was more famous, then she would be constantly hounded for autographs or stuck in cartoon after cartoon with no time to herself. Thus, she and Buster get to have a fun and relaxing motorcycle ride with the freedom to do whatever they want to do. Yosemite Sam tells Hampton that being a bad guy doesn't mean seeking to do bad, it means taking the concept of good to extremes, as he proves by continually justifying why he's torturing the students. Which, technically speaking, is true, as very few people society considers bad actually see themselves as bad. Not everyone commits a crime just for the sake of committing a crime. And by that logic, Hampton quickly learns that he likes being the bad guy too, and eventually the student surpasses the teacher. Plucky gets hit the hardest as he's forced to take a vow of silence, meaning literally removing his beak, and he's reduced to grunt work by a wily coyote. But it's too much for the egotist, and thus he releases his inner mad scientist by spreading chaos throughout the science lab, and either Wily is impressed with his work or he just wants to get rid of him because he passes either way. But of course, Daffy comes in and admits he got the test switched around and everyone got the wrong aptitude results, though everyone still admits they had a good time. Hey, you know what? That was funny. That was enjoyable. That was interesting to see all these personalities accept new facets that they then make work with their existing personalities. Oh my god, another writer has decided to break the moldy mold the show has forced upon its scripts and actually give us something decent. Even though I still hesitate to consider it great, since it does feel a little crowded for 20 minutes. Not just having to deal with the three boys, but also Barbara and Sweetie, who, for their plot, are stuck in a never-ending quest to find the source of the rancid smell in their dorm room. Where the two realize what isn't that smell, as they find all sorts of rotting detritus and sterilize their quarters, Barbara even forcing Sweetie to take a bath, and they still can't find the main source, which of course ends up being Barbara's fault that Sweetie taunts her about, and they go back to their day off. Yeah, 6 minutes well utilized. Still, by the very low bar the show is set, this episode does manage to pull an Olympic-level leap and make a noticeable effort to be decent, and if you're stuck watching this episode, it's not the worst experience you'll ever have. Also, does anyone notice that while Buster and friends have plots concerning clones, pizza parties, football games, and secret societies, most of Barbara's plots involve cleaning up, acing tests, fawning over clothes, and having to deal with annoying roommates? I'm probably not qualified to suggest anything, but I'm just saying. Nightmare on Toon Street is the first and only two-parter. It's Halloween, but Barbara and Hampton think the season is too spoopy for them, so Sweetie takes them to a not-at-all spooky farm retreat, only to find that OMG, it is totes spoopy. So I do have to give the episode credit for its Freddy Krueger reference. Obviously, the original show did better, but I like that they actually grew half a pair and referenced something not squeaky clean for their sheltered audience. And that's pretty much the only good thing I have to say about this one. I must once again congratulate the show for taking what could have been a fun creative idea and watering it down to practically nothing. The first 5 minutes are the characters just sitting around and discussing how they either like or don't like Halloween, while Buster and Sweetie are overcome with guilt that they had the gall to scare Barbara and Hampton with cheap masks. So Sweetie wins a contest that promises a scare-free trip for all of them, and then there's a long sequence of them just gushing about how excited they are on the ride there, and then they get there, and it looks exactly like everywhere else in the show. Yeah, that's one of the major problems with this episode and the show in general. On a technical level, the animation is really good. Very fluid, very colorful, and just like the previous show, Spielberg's money is clearly on screen. But like everything else, it's too safe, and nowhere is that more obvious than here. This is supposed to be a creepy, decrepit house where the gang are threatened by evil monsters, but everything is still drawn with the same neat lines, bright colors, and fluid animation as everything else. When the original show wanted to be scary, they got scary. They worked with different angles, shadows, backgrounds, and actually thought up scenarios that could work in a frightening situation. And this was back when cartoons were still hand-drawn and painted, with much less digital assistance and much more to go wrong. This is made with state-of-the-art animation software and the best artists in the business, and it looks like the characters are being threatened by a coloring book. At the very least, give them some shading so they don't contrast so horribly against the more detailed backgrounds, but as usual, the animation isn't the only problem, as the episode steadfastly refuses to take advantage of any potential to be funny or emotional. Oh, Hampton refuses to open his eyes because he's so scared? That's the makings of a good comedy, but nope, everything goes perfectly for him, and the rest is just the characters screaming and making funny faces and refusing to let the situation speak for itself or the mood sink in. You know, like they've been doing this entire show. Oh, but then it turns out that everything is fake, and it was all a prank by Montana, who's suddenly back, and then gone again just as quickly. So there was never anything to be scared of, except then there is, as one of the ghosts actually was real and has decided to choose this moment to terrorize them. So they trap him with an elaborate ruse that, okay, is a little impressive, and then leave, which why couldn't they just leave in the first place? Nothing was holding them there, they could have gone home at any time, and the trap doesn't matter anyway because the ghost gets free and follows them to Acme Lou, where it begins torturing the students. Though again, seeing Furball giving himself a cat bath and the ghost turning the tub water on was actually genius. Not genius is that this is just a generic ghost guy created for the show, and why couldn't they have used any one of multiple Looney Tunes monsters? Also now Buster, Sweetie, and Plucky are scared of the ghost, while Barbara and Hampton aren't. Not because they learned anything, but because we're at that page in the script. So they get advice from Shirley, then they read a book that Plucky just so happened to randomly take from the farmhouse, which tells them to get ingredients to banish the ghost, which they do at the Lou Brew. Oh, did I just speed through that entire sum up? Well, that's what the second part does too, so if they're not gonna bother with pacing, tension, or emotional investment, then why should I? I know I sound like a broken record by this point, but this was yet another disappointment. What could have been a chance to get experimental and venture outside their comfort zone is left even more lifeless than the ghost antagonist. There's not even a reason for this to be a two-parter, as it's basically one story stable to the end of another. It could have easily ended with Montana's plot revealed to be fake, then the gang discover there's an actual ghost and run out the door, which might have even been funny. If you want something creatively creepy, just watch the beginning of Things That Go Tweet in the Woods, or any of the horror segments for the original series, and leave this thing to rot in its grave. Also, Farting Spider, because if you can't be scary, be crude, I guess. Winter Blunderland is the second and final double-length special. It's wintertime in Acme Lou, and everybody's having a blast, up until a disaster befalls the university and the school threatens to close. Luckily, Sweetie finds a map that may lead the gang to something that will save the school. But they're not the only one who found a prize in their specially marked cereal. You may have noticed that it actually sounds like a creative idea for an episode, so how much do you want to bet that they do absolutely nothing with it? Well, you'd lose that bet because this episode is actually good. No, I'm not trolling you, and I haven't finally gone insane. This episode is really good. Admittedly, it does have a slow start, as we just get our usual random stuff happening with a little to no context that the show thinks counts as comedy, including a drawn-out gag where Buster tricks Plucky into rubbing his foot that leads nowhere, which the show tries to make us think is gross when I think half the internet wishes they were Plucky right now. But then snow starts falling and it suddenly picks up, as we get to see everyone playing in the snow in their own unique way, including the start of a running gag where Plucky, who has never seen snow before due to flying south every previous winter, develops an obsession with the stuff. It's also revealed that Buster is literally the luckiest rabbit alive and can make miracles happen with his luck-based powers. However, once in a while, his luck's polarity can change and suddenly everything goes horribly wrong, as demonstrated with him pushing a sled down a hill sets off an entertaining chain of events that results in a freak lightning storm incinerating the entire school budget. And because I guess this universe has never heard of a bank, the school announces it's bankrupt and immediately begins to shut down. But all is not lost as Sweetie finds all the puzzle pieces for a map of their favorite cereal, which is an actual treasure map that will lead them to enough treasure that will save their college, where the trail just so happens to start right on campus. And the rest of the episode is a treasure hunt, which you have to try to make uninteresting, which I feel the show would take as a challenge, but thankfully we get a very fun adventure with some very creative obstacles. When the gang have to literally manipulate time in order to proceed to the next room, you know someone had fun writing this. What's even better is that everyone has something to contribute. We have Plucky's obsession with snow, which actually helps him escape several trap-filled rooms, Buster's continual brushes with bad luck that he tries to hide from his friends, and Hampton's okay, he doesn't actually add anything. And neither does Barbara, besides screaming at Buster that he's currently unlucky. But then there's Sweetie, who finally feels like an actual character and not just an attachment to Barbara or whoever they're paired up with. It is so much fun seeing them pretending to be a pirate and being stoked that they're on a quest for treasure, facing danger and excitement, to the point that when Buster does admit he's trapped in a streak of bad luck, they just say, so what? It's what started us on the best adventure of our lives. Also, it's really nice to have another episode with some actual stakes, where the gang constantly have to get themselves out of danger and where they have to race the clock before the college is shut down for good. Again, why is it so hard for this show to understand what keeps an audience invested? Oh, and it helps that the episode is genuinely funny. Again, I love Plucky's obsession with snow and how he hoards it to take it with him to his new school, proving that he has no idea what it actually is. Then there's how Hampton has his life so planned out that he worries not graduating on time will mean he never meets the love of his life. Or just watching the senior staff reminisce on their past memories together, among other moments that serve as a rare indicator somebody cared about their job. Oh, and Elmer's the villain, being the only other one to complete the cereal map, who wants the treasure because the cereal mascot embarrassed him when he pitched his own idea for cereal. Again, that's funny. As well as his trademark chuckle turning into a villainous laugh. Now, the episode still has its flaws. For every good joke, there's one that falls flat or at least could have used another rewrite, especially when they're writing in a minecart with Buster getting pummeled, but he's not given any major cartoon reactions to things like getting squashed flat. Heck, there are quite a few animation shortcuts, like a needless zoom on a still frame that looks accidentally inserted in editing and never fixed. Also, Elmer just disappears and we never find out what becomes of him. However, I'm comfortable with saying that I enjoyed watching this one, and I'm willing to consider it the best episode of the entire series. Heck, I'll go so far as to say it's better than when the original series had their own treasure hunt episode. It's a rare instance where it actually feels like a complete plot, with varied characters, funny jokes, decent pacing, and situations that take more than somebody just admitting that they're sorry to another. And I'm only angry because it's the exception rather than the rule when it comes to this series. So if you're forced to watch an episode of the show, have it be this one. It's not perfect, but it functions as an above average episode of a cartoon. And I guess it's good that this is the best episode, as it's also the last. Yep, the series only lasted 23 episodes, absolutely pathetic for a series based on a popular IP. Not that I wanted to see more, but that indicates just how well the show went over with audiences and how much enthusiasm the staff had working on it. But it ended on enough of a glowing note that I don't feel as bitter having to sit through this show as I was planning to be. Also, the Sugar Me Timbers jingle won't be living in my head anytime soon. And that concludes my look through every single episode of the Tiny Toons reboot. Originally, I planned to have this be a ranking video where I'd grade every episode on a tier list, but the more I watched, the more I just wanted to assign the entire show an F. But if you'd like to know how I think the episodes stack up, then here's my list of best to worst. Of this list, I guess I recommend the first 5, while the next 5 aren't too painful to sit through, the following 8 just exist, and the final 5 have a place reserved in hell. But even with the quality I managed to find, I still don't like this show. Yeah, even the good episodes don't outweigh just how much of a slog it was to sit through a series that mostly ranged from just mid to outright garbage. I've heard that there's a lot of drama going on with Warner Brothers Cartoon Network and HBO Max, and that probably factored into things, but whatever the reason, I don't know why they even made this. This is one of the most milquetoast shows I've ever seen, with the IP adjusted so much to fit the new setting, I don't know why they bothered using it. The original series was made by people who wanted to make Looney Tunes, but for a new generation. The people behind this were clearly just told to make a kid's show, and that's all the thought and effort that went into it. Heck, the word I'd use to describe the show as a whole is less bad and closer to unfinished. It genuinely feels like the writers had ideas, started developing those ideas, but the deadline got moved up and they had to immediately submit whatever they were working on, hence why some episodes feel less complete than others. Barbara, of course, gets it the worst, lacking any of the personality her counterpart originally displayed, and even Sweetie, despite being the breakout character, is just a louder Barbara. And everyone else is just there, completely malleable depending on what the script needs them to do. Obviously, I'm not nostalgia blind and demanding the show be exactly like its predecessor. Current tastes are different, and that show did a lot of stuff I'm surprised they got away with even back then that has no chance of working today when media is much more scrutinized. But this does not deserve the Tiny Toons title. From its lackluster comedy to its tonal shift to just how little the structure of characters match their original counterparts, most of it just comes across as Tiny Toons in name only. But what really made me angry was its insistence that each episode has to teach some kind of message, most of them coming across as condescending and even harmful. It feels like there was no respect for their audience, like they couldn't bear the fact that they might upset their young viewers and just paid lip service to their older fans. So even with the mindset of, but it's for kids, I don't think kids would like it. It's surprisingly boring, with jokes that barely count as jokes and characters that barely count as characters. It boils down to noise, inoffensive noise. Sure, kids might passively watch it, in the same way kids will watch anything bright and colorful with a hint of rude humor, but eventually the age group I think they're trying to target are going to realize the show's just teaching the same lessons they've had crammed down their throats since preschool, and move on to something more worth their attention. Overall, I don't know if I could call this one of the worst shows I've ever seen, as that would require me to acknowledge it exists as a functional show, but it is one of the most miserable viewing experiences I've ever had. Whether an episode was good or bad, it genuinely hurt me how apathetic and cynical the show as a whole felt. Maybe if the characters had more fleshed out personalities and they dictated the stories instead of the other way around, then this could have worked as its own thing. But the attitude is clearly just get it done and get it out there. Any quality was just a bonus. Nobody asked for this, nobody wanted this, they made it, released it, and thought nothing more of it. And that's all the attention it deserves. If you'd like a modern take on Tiny Toons, then go watch Gumball. It captures a lot of the same tone and humor as that show, with a large cast of distinctive characters heading very funny and even experimental plots and situations, with a lot of edge, but also a lot of heart, all made by a team clearly passionate for their work. Unlike this, which will likely only be brought up as background noise for daycare, or when a reviewer needs fodder for their channel talking about forgotten animated shows. If you're still curious, then go ahead and watch the episodes I recommended, but be prepared to forget them within the week. As for me, I watched the show, wrote about it, edited the videos together, and published them for all to see, and now I'm ready to move on. As the actual Tiny Toons would say, the certain song is indeed done. I'll see you next time for a show that's hopefully more worth your time and investment.